right, we'll call to order our IVDA meeting. We'll go ahead and take the roll call at this time, and we may have additional members that may join us a little later, but so good. We'll call roll.
Please state your name for the record. Members from the City of Colton.
Isaac Suchel.
Jack Woods.
Thank you. Members from the City of Loma Linda.
Dusty Rigsby.
And Ovi Popescu.
Thank you. Members from the City of San Bernardino.
John Valdivia.
Theodore Sanchez.
Besseem Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Since we are going to recess into closed session, we'll first ask if there's any public comment related to closed session. Seeing no one other than staff, I'm going to go ahead and recess to closed session. Thank you.
I understand. Roll. Hold on. Tap on it. Hold on. I understand roll call's already been taken. And at this time, I will ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and ask Mayor Valdivia if he'll lead us.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. With that said, are there any items to be added or deleted? Yeah, I'm a good reader.
No items.
Right there, okay. Any items to be added or deleted to the agenda?
No items.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Any conflict of interests to be disclosed at this time, members? No? All right. Any informational items to present?
Yeah, just a couple. So I'm going to have Ms. Goodman give you a quick update. From time to time, we do need to upgrade our website to meet not just the community's needs, but also the law. So Brandy, if you would.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members. A disability icon has been added to the homepage of the IVDA's website. It's right here on the far left. Once you click on it, you are having a vast amount of options that are available. The first one being keyboard navigation. When you click here, it allows users to be able to access all of the content without a mouse, solely utilizing the keyboard. Here we have our big cursor. Once you click on there, it allows the cursor to become increased, or the arrow. Third is our contrast. When you click here, it removes all of the color from the image. I'll deselect some of these. Bigger text, which allows the text to increase in size. Desaturate, which will remove the all of the color. Highlight links to make it clear for the individual. Do that. Legible fonts, just makes it a little bit more clear. And one cool feature is clicking here, it will read the page aloud.
Enabled. Use the arrow keys to select items to read. This website uses the Userway Accessibility widget. Hit Ctrl U on your keyboard to enable the widget and keyboard navigation. Button. Skip to main content. Link. Header landmark. Link to current agenda PDF. Link.
It also increases the sound or the speed of the sound. And lastly, we have tooltips and page structure, which just allows and highlights certain areas of the page so the user can follow. And that's the end of my report.
So feel free to road test it, your staff as well. If you find other comments, recommendations, please send it our way and we'll incorporate those. I have one other update on our Mountain View project. You've heard me talk for quite a while about this one, and we have been working hard to coordinate this with SBCTA and the Redlands Passenger Rail Project. Our development team there is prepping for mobilization on the first utility locations in late August. And the first one will be relocation of the high-pressure gas line that feeds the Mountain View Power Plant. So the specific date and time, I will be providing you that information and the specific mobilization and road closures. There was a specific request from SBCTA to try to make sure we can get in the ground before September, and Mr. Harris and team have worked hard to make sure that there's a way to do that. we communicated the same to SBCTA. So more to come on that, but next month we should start seeing some activity out there.
Very good. Mr. Popescu?
Remind me, Mike, this project is we're putting 2 lanes from the bridge all the way to the freeway?
Correct,
And
correct.
What is the cost of the actual construction for that whole portion?
It's a little over $10 million for everything because we have to also completely reconstruct the Mission Creek Channel.
So for $10 million, we're adding about a mile's worth of road?
Just
That's
about.
not bad.
We have to stop short of the Caltrans right-of-way. So
Okay.
there will be a companion piece we're working actually with your city manager on to come in and do a pavement rehab on just that north
And
reach.
of the $10 million, how much of that is being contributed by the IVDA?
All of it.
All of it. So we have the money set aside, so it's just a matter of pulling the trigger and getting it done.
We've been waiting a long time and we're
Okay.
anxious to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mayor?
So, Mr. Burrows, can you please give us, it's essentially 2 up, 2 down from San Bernardino Road, and it probably extends just north of San Bernardino Road. Is that accurate?
It actually extends north of San Bernardino Avenue, past the Mountain View Power Plant, and connects to where we terminated our prior Phase 1 project constructing the bridge. So this will run all the way up to the Santa Ana River Bridge crossing and connect that.
Well, I'm very appreciative for the staff and all the energies placed on this effort. I know that as a councilman, I was had those initial conversations with you. This is an important piece, and our city is very cooperative, and we are cheering this project alongside, our member agencies. This is an important part for our airport and distribution, and it certainly will direct traffic off of the Tippecanoe and some of the complaints that we get on Orange Show. So we're grateful. So thank you.
And for you all, because you all are no strangers to construction yourselves, we are also adding a project page on the website so the public with road closure information can get easy access to the detours, because I drive it too, and I want to make sure everybody knows where to go once we get working. So that concludes my report.
All right. Anyone else? Thank you so very much, Mr. Burrows. Moving on to the consent calendar, I will entertain a motion on items 3 through 6 on the
Madam
consent
Chair, I
calendar.
move it.
Have a motion? Is there a
Second.
Second,
With a comment?
with a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On item number 3 on the check register, Mr. Burrows, item number 11, California Strategies and Advocacy. Would you mind sending me a contract in the board, a contract on what their scope of services
Absolutely.
are? Thank you.
We can provide you that.
All right, anyone else? I have a motion and a second. Any additional comments? Any opposition? Hearing none, the consent calendar is approved. Moving on to item number 7, which is to approve amendment number 2 to the professional services agreement with WSP USA Inc. for the Mountain View Widening Project Phase 2 in the amount of $119,000. Mr. Harris, would you be so kind as to make this item's presentation?
Thank you very much. Continuing with the Mountain View items that Mike was discussing with you, this item will expand and continue the design phase of the roadway and bridge, alterations to the flood channel at Mission Creek, access to the power generation station. We're going to widen the road and impact several businesses and private residences. To that extent, we require additional right-of-way. I'm happy to say we're down to the last 2 or 3 residences that will allow us access to on their property so we can do curb gutter sidewalk on the west side of Mountain View. This amendment is kind of a catch-all. We are dealing with a lot of different issues, from additional right-of-way assistance to additional work that was not originally envisioned dealing with the cities, addressing their needs and wants for additional utilities under the bridge or in the roadway. We're also dealing with the flood control, county flood control. They requested several changes over the years to enhance the channel, from widening, deepening, armoring the side, moving it 10 feet to the south. And all of this takes time and effort from the engineering firm that is involved with the design, which is WSP.
Questions, board members?
Question?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Harris, you alluded to the fact that there's a curb and gutter replacement or a curb and gutter installation on the west side of that project area. Does that also include sidewalk and pedestrian use for sidewalks? I know that there are a lot of children that interface with the Victoria Elementary School, and while it's a distance from this, it nevertheless would impact pedestrian safety and pedestrian use. So my question is, does that, are there sidewalk improvements or is it merely curb and gutter?
Curb, gutters, and sidewalk. The entire west side of Mountain View from just south of the Santa Ana River all the way down to the new bridge.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Move for approval?
No. Oh, I have a motion. I have some questions, but go ahead. I have a motion. Is there a second? And a second. Questions. When, and perhaps I'm sure it's here in the item, I just didn't see it. When did this project start?
2009.
2009. Understanding that this project is quite complex, how did the consultant miss, if you will, the $119,000 additional cost that we're looking at? Did we fail to include this scope of work in the original RFP? What's the explanation here for this large amount of money being requested at this time?
When you develop an engineering scope of work, you make assessment as to how many times you're going to need to talk to the utilities, the counties, cities, whoever's a stakeholder in the work. This particular job has gone back to all three cities and the utilities. You would estimate 2 times. I think we're up to number 7 now in most instances. So that is why this is such a large relative number, but it is spread out over the 19 different items that are listed in the report.
And to the supervisor's concern as well, because we're dealing with a flood control channel that is deemed waters of the United States, we also got multiple rounds with the Army Corps of Engineers, County Flood Control, and revisions in the scope of the Redlands Passenger Rail Project, which at various intervals was 1 track, 2 tracks, 1 track, 2 tracks, and that required additional design to catch up with the city comments. Mountain View Power Plant had their own requests that had to be updated more than once. So it's been, with a busy stretch of a corridor, there's a lot of engagement, a lot of input, and a lot of coordination. But that's why you're seeing it at this time, because all of those folks have signed off on what their requirements will be to allow us to build this final product.
So you're telling me that all of everything you've just described and the work that's been identified was all unforeseen work? But at the time that we wrote up the RFP and it was released, we did not foresee this work, and in any way is this still within the realm, the parameters of the RFP as it was issued originally?
This is in addition to the RFP.
So this is the same type of work. This is still engineering services, but in 2009, their scope was based off of what was entitled in the environmental impact report and the design, and then as these permits were received.
I'm going to stop you right there because I need to hear from Mr. Harris.
Go ahead, Jim.
The original scope included all of these items. What this is doing is, because of the extensive amount of review and comment from the agencies involved, you can only assume that there will be 2 reviews of a set of plans. As I said, we're up to several reviews and changes over time. So the original scope of work was accounted for. This is building on the original scope for those items that required more work to be done.
True, but would it not have been due consideration for us to look at another RFP versus continuing to add? And again, my only concern is, are we still within the parameters of the financial parameters of that original RFP?
This is in addition to the original parameters.
So it's beyond the original parameters.
Yes, it is.
I'm talking
It's-
money-wise, not work-wise, money-wise.
Money-wise, yes.
Okay, so I need to know, are we in any violation here? Should we go out for another RFP?
No, this is building on the original engineer's work. If you were to put out another RFP and they failed to get the job, basically, then the amount of time, effort to get a second company up to speed to the same point that the original firm was in would not be
No, I
reasonable.
understand the jeopardy.
Yes.
I'm wanting to make sure that we are within our legal parameters, that we are able to move on this item based on the original RFP outlines, you know, so that we're being fair to everyone that responds to the RFPs, and later on we're not accused of, well, you know, you guys just like this company, you like this developer, you just gave them the extra work.
Sure, and I'll have legal counsel address that, because we did confer with him on this issue, Supervisor. Michael?
So, Madam Chair, being that this was a professional services contract rather than a competitively bid process, it becomes a discretionary item for the board as to whether or not they want to move forward with that. And you doing that, exercising that discretion, you take in the full parameters of things, as discussed by Mr. Harris and Mr. Barrows, including the lengthy time that was involved in all of this.
Very good, so that's now in the minutes. I have first Councilmember Sanchez, I'm sorry, and then Mayor Valdivia.
Okay, yes, so I think here that we need to know the billable hours, right? So just the costs need to be annotated. So the reason that they were awarded, the reason that these contractors were awarded this job was because of their competitive rates, right? The competitive rates and their work experience. We need to ensure that the 140 or however much it is, that is comparable to their original rates, and that the rates have not gone up. Because if the rates have gone up, then they have now, then they are no longer competitive. And I
they've
understand that
breached.
we're in a, yeah, exactly. We're in a situation right now where to change contractors, there's work that's going to need to be redone, correct?
What they are presently is they are the engineer of record. So their engineering stamp and professional license for everything that supports what's to be built. They're not constructing it. They designed and engineered it. That is on their stamp. And when Mr. Harris and the team assessed the additional hourly billings on this, and you'll see in his report for each task, he enumerates how many hours for each of those. He then goes to the industry to, because we have other engineers out there to test the market so that there is a reasonable comparison, that you're getting the market price. If this were construction and we did a construction bid to build something in 2009, this would be rebid completely for construction. This is design and engineering, and that's why we presented what we have before you here today, because there is a lot of expectation to proceed to actually get this built now so that we can provide good value and good overall value for the project.
So do we have assurances that this is still a competitive rate, considering the scope of work that we would have to contract with for this 100 and some?
Yes,
That rate
Yes.
is still a competitive
Yes.
rate.
yes.
All right, Mayor Valdivia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple questions. You know, the operative word that was used is professional services agreement. So help us briefly describe the use of a bid versus a professional services agreement, and how did our staff undertake that and go the route of a professional services agreement?
So going back into 2009, there was an RFP issued for professional engineering services to design this particular project. And WSP was the successful firm in that competitive process. And so they were awarded that scope at that time and have continued to be the engineer of record throughout this process.
So that still doesn't answer my question. My question is, what route did you take and why did you take that route? Is it simply because it was constructed as a RFP for professional services agreement?
No,
and staff made that
our
determination?
procurement procedures and policy requires us for larger projects such as this to actually RFP the professional services, bring those results back to you with a recommendation based off that public process, and then you can then determine the award at that time. That's what occurred with this IVDA board at that
Was
time.
that before your time?
No, I was
You
here.
were here in 09.
I was here.
He's
yes.
been here the whole time.
There was no before your time. Okay, all right. Well,
Well,
good. I'm
there
new to the
actually
sport.
was for a spell.
I'm actually new to this sport, so I would have known you in 2009.
And the difference there is more so, not so much is it procured. So there's an RFP for professional services. There's requests for qualifications for professional services. This was an RFP because we wanted not only the qualifications but the actual pricing. So we would lock in the rates at that time.
Very good, and I
that's what we
understand that. So I get the professional services agreement, and who can answer this? I don't know. Are there contingencies set forth in a professional services agreement? Why or why not?
It depends on the project. Some projects you can actually, RFP and all-in cost. In this case, there were some original allowances in the 2009 award, but these clearly exceed those. In construction, we always, per policy, include a 10% contingency, but that's for actual public works construction.
What is normal in a professional services agreement, typical for a contingency?
You can have an allowance. It's not really a contingency. In most of our contracts, though, we just do a hard price, and it's an amount not to exceed.
Right.
And that's what 99% of our projects include. But once in a while, we include an allowance for unforeseen.
Well, I support it. We need this, and my motion will stand. I appreciate the responses. I do have multiple other questions, but I'll email them to you. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I have a motion, I have a second. Any additional questions, comments? Hearing none, item number 7 is approved. Moving on to item number 8, and hold on. Uh-oh, I did something. What did I do? Doggone it. Oh, there it is. No, I'm supposed to hit the bottom.
The bookmark on the bottom there.
That's it. Right, oh, there it is. I got it. Yep. I got it. All right, item number 8, which is to consider and discuss a report on the status of the 2020 strategic plan update for the Inland Valley Development Agency. And I will dare to jump in on this very quickly and ask, has anything changed?
The current plan is in place. The update is scheduled for adoption on or before December of this year. And this background is to set the stage to get your feedback so we can get going on drafting that particular document.
All right, so then with that, I will ask, is there any feedback from board members on this item? Mr. Popescu.
I had a couple questions. So
All right.
are we going to go through the presentation or not?
So there are a couple new slides in this, so
Yeah,
we
let's
could
do
do
it.
just
Let's
that.
do it.
But
I just wanted you
yeah.
to highlight if there
Yeah.
have been any
Yeah, true.
changes so that then we can focus on that.
Yeah.
Correct.
It might help as you get to your slides, but I just had some questions of clarification, and then it may open up further discussion. On slide number, it's page 54, which is established priorities. I don't know if you want to just skip to that. Prior projects, SBD International Airport. Just for the sake of the new members, at the present time, how much money does the IVDA contribute to airport operations?
So airport operations right now, we do not subsidize. We had been when we were receiving the payments through the prior agreement. That is, of course, a subject of litigation with the Department of Finance. And so the most recent contributions for capital or operations have been assisting the airport in constructing facilities, most recently the FedEx hangar. That was this past year, and that was about $3 million.
Okay. But
Previously, we were contributing in upwards of $5.5 million annually.
But presently, doesn't many of the position get funded from IVDA and SBIA?
So what we have is in most cases, the staff, the primary staff who also provide work on the airport are cost allocated. So a portion of their time, in some cases mine, is 50% of my time is IVDA, 15% is the airport. In other cases, we
I
have
see.
splits based on their actual time
So,
worked,
okay.
and it's less.
Okay, so it's whatever that gets paid is for IVDA work versus the other. Number 2, economic development. Help me, remind me, I should say, we have a free trade zone.
Yes.
Where is that located within the
So
IVDA?
the actual capabilities of the foreign trade zone now, due to changes we helped initiate in 2009 nationally, go all the way to Alabama Avenue, and then from there all the way back to the Port of Long Beach. Any property from there all the way back, one could activate in the foreign trade
Okay,
zone.
good.
If you're
Well, that-
here
so it includes
on the
everything
former
within the
base
IVDA.
site, then you save costs and time in your application process with our endorsement, because we have the relationship with the Port of Long Beach, and we can then propose with that operator to reduce their time and money.
Cool, okay. And then on item number 3, infrastructure, I know earlier you had clarified that we have $10 million reporting towards Mountain View. How much additional money does the IVDA have that it can contribute to other infrastructure improvements right now?
So discretionary-wise, there are about $3 million in this current adopted budget.
Okay.
Again, I can only respond as to what
Yeah.
you've approved in the budget. And then we have a number of federal grants
Okay.
that are pending, which would open up additional, which would be in upwards of another $7 million for this forthcoming year. So grants are always a part of what we do, and we continue to apply for them and thankfully get them.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sucho?
Yeah, Mike, and priority number 1 on the first bullet point, I think I tendered the question is this board also going to be focusing on carrying, air cargo and more of an airport? I don't see that in here anywhere because other than, hang on,
so
Mike, hang on. Because Supervisor Hagman and myself have the same thoughts that we need to focus on something here. It seems like we're all over the place here. We have a nice airport. Let's capitalize on it, on its most valued commodity, which is air cargo at this point. So where are we on that? Thanks, Mike.
So if I can just address that, and in part, that's why I kind of want to walk through this presentation so I can provide you background and history, which would answer that.
And before you do that, I need to ask, I know last time, and the time before that, I asked that all board members come in, schedule a briefing with you to bring you up to date. Has that been done?
So we had initial orientation meetings, and
yes or no?
additional meetings since have not occurred yet. No.
Okay, so then we're having before I even go there, how many of our board members have attended a briefing with Mike Burrows or by this airport? Please raise your hand.
Like in the last,
Within the last 2 months, 3 months, since the election? None.
Oh, since the election, yeah.
Well, since which election?
Right.
Well, we had November, and then we had what? That was it. That was
Since
it.
November, yes.
Since November?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
well, we've met with him, but not necessarily on this particular topic.
Meeting is one thing. That's not what I asked for. I said an update, briefing them on the airport, how this airport works, how much money we have, what the plans are. Has that happened, board members?
Yes.
Yes? Anyone
Initial
else?
orientation.
So she's had the orientation.
And you did?
Orientation,
Missy? Okay, anyone else? That needs to happen.
Okay.
That needs to happen.
Okay.
You need to send out those emails, and you need to make those appointments, and our board members need to keep them, and that goes for the alternates too. And I need to be informed if those appointments have not been kept because it becomes useless for us to be sharing all this information and then we're going, SBD 101 here in front of God and everybody and we're not getting anywhere because we have to be plugged in. All right, this is the last time I'm going to say this, and you need to let me know if in fact this isn't being done. All right, so, and the answer is no, we will not do Airport 101 right now. So do the presentation. Anybody has any questions about any background, you take your own time, get yourself into the meetings, and I'm hoping that you heard me out there, I don't know, and get yourself informed and get the orientation done. Continue.
Well, real quick,
Oh, I'm
let me
sorry.
finish my train of thought. I kind of respectfully disagree with you, Supervisor, because as it's stated here, priorities. And if we're going to be going through with priorities here, that's why I bring it up.
Right.
That's the only reason I bring it up.
Well, say that again, I'm sorry.
Well, you don't want us to offer the suggestions or the ideas that we originally tendered earlier, but yet they're not on here. And I just want an answer as why it's not on here and which direction. Well, I see which direction they want to go, which is in front of us.
Well,
Right. I hear what you're saying, but again, I think it's important that the board members get a flavor for the historical path that we have been on. If we're going to change course, as has been discussed, then everyone knows that it's a changing of course that there are, and also we need to incorporate the fact that today's economies and the makeup of this board is so different and will allow for that change to happen because it's also critical that you all know that what you have stated, Councilmember Sucho, has been a priority for some of us, but that the will of the board as a majority was not. And consequently, because we're ruled by the majority, there were things we had to step back and also ruled by the economy. Right now, it seems that all of those elements not only have changed, but are favorable and lend themselves for the type of conversation and ultimately a change in direction should that be the will of this board. So it's been a little bit of the past not willing and now a change in the present. I totally agree.
I just want to make one last statement. And this was done in 1990, and it seems like this board is still doing the same thing back then. We need to progress with the times, and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, you're correct. But remember, this board has only been with you individuals in these seats for a very limited amount of time. And that's why it's imperative that those orientations take place so that we can be up to speed ASAP and change with the will of this board, not previous boards.
And just to intervene a little bit, and not to cut off Mike as he was going to answer his question, but back to Mr. Sucho, this board, as long as I've been here for 11 years, has never dictated about what type of airport this should be, whether it be cargo, passenger, commercial. That wasn't our role. Our role was to develop the properties around the airport, raise revenue, put that money back in the airport. The airport board decided what areas to focus. So we as a board do not prioritize cargo or commercial service. That's up to the airport to do so. I think the IVDA does play a role in making sure that the airport does become successful because of the fact that we are contributing money to it. So I want to make sure that's clear because if this board wants to get involved and dictate whether we should have passengers or not, I think that may be a different discussion for a different time. But from everything that I've seen here, we've only done things to help support the airport,
Yes.
and then the airport decided what things to focus on.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Mike. You
So
were gonna.
if I may touch on that, thank you again. I heard you loud and clear, Supervisor. I
All
made
right.
notes. What you have on this slide right here, when you see 2015 to 2020, those were the 4 priorities in the current plan that's about to expire. So I'm only putting in what was part of what is presently existing. Where priority number 1 comes from is further enumerated on page 57. So in 1990, yes, the IVDA was formed through special legislation by the state of California. At that time, there was no airport authority. It was going to be the single purpose unit of government to handle all of the base reuse planning, including airport, including everything that went with it, and negotiate the transfer and acquire Norton Air Force Base. The actual text of the Joint Powers Agreement is on page 57, and that still exists today. So in 2015, why that governing body elected to make the airport a continued priority is because it's still in the agreement. However, to your point, because it's in the current agreement, doesn't mean you cannot, as a board of directors, decide how and if and when that occurs. That is totally in your purview, which is why it is absolutely appropriate to talk about while you're looking at the new plan. In 1992, the Airport Authority, separate legal body, was formed. And that was as a settlement to litigation when the IVDA moved in 1991 to adopt its state redevelopment plan. We had 2 communities, the city of Highland and the city of Redlands, that felt they wanted more say-so in what happened to the airport. They had previously, to that point, not wanted to participate in this IVDA. That 1992 settlement dictates that the IVDA would continue its broad support of the airport, but would in no shape or form own airport property. Therefore, it is not on the airport deed. It never has been. And the airport authority makes the determining decisions as to what to do with that asset. This organization historically, and in this plan year, has lined out opportunities to provide financial support, either in operating or capital funds or both. And that's what we are seeing through the end of 2020. So I hope that helps clarify it. And to all of the comments received, I hear that loud and clear. And we will make time to do just what you've directed. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's why it's so important that we have those orientations so that we know exactly what our role is, depending on what agency we sit on.
Yep.
All right,
Madam
Mayor.
Chair. Mike, what you just said was probably the most informative thing I've heard you say in all the years I've known you. So I almost feel like I just had the brief.
Go ahead with your bad self. Go ahead.
That's all you're going to say?
That's it.
And that didn't prompt any other thought?
No, we're not going there. I'm sure
No,
it
but
did.
I think the background is extremely important for this organization. We
Yeah.
need to know the limits of our power. We need to know the
Correct.
limits of our influence.
Correct.
And that was very helpful, very helpful.
And that's why the orientations are so important, so that when we walk in wearing whatever particular hat we're wearing, that we know exactly what, kind of like that RFP and RFQ, what
Absolutely.
the parameters are.
Absolutely. And I need to remember in my senior years now that when we did this plan, we had, as the supervisor reminds me, members that had some of that background and continuity, and I take that to heart. That's good feedback for me going forward. So.
Right, and that was something for you new board members, is that in the past, there was longevity in the board members. Once they came on board, they stayed for years. And it is only until now, within the last 5-6 months, that we have not only had a turnover, but we've had radical turnover. And that makes this, for all intents and purposes, like a brand new board with a new vision that is very timely, because we need to be working on that next 5-year plan, and it has to be what you all want and envision.
Yeah.
All right, so Mike.
So I want to hit on a couple more slides, and then to the supervisor's point, then I will follow up with you all to drill down and get direct feedback, because they'll have time to give me insights, and we'll incorporate that. So I'm going to move on from here. In 2015, if you could back up one. In 2015, even with some longevity on the dais here, we attempted to really try to define at that point in time what the IVDA was. And I don't know that you would define it the same way. So that's why I kind of want to touch on these few little boxes here. But going back to the DNA, in 1990, you've had a regional joint powers authority that was formed, and it had its self-emission statement. And it really was there as the public body to make sure that Norton Air Force Base was transferred to these communities and that the surrounding area benefited both in economic and development and job creation. You know, I mean, you are the governing body, the board of directors, but the focus for the plan elements was to look at comprehensive base reuse and development of a safe, sustainable public airport. And then also look at opportunities to do economic and community revitalization. And so all of those plan details in the back of that strategic plan all spool up from that direction. If you can go to the next one. So the customer base at that time, we looked to grow that. As you saw in the strategic plan update that was provided at your last meeting, thankfully, we've had a good run and that we've been able to do that. 12,645 direct jobs as of 2018 completion and over 15.2 million square feet. That's doing better. But we're coming up to the renewal of this and we need to look at where the next bar should be set. If you could go to the next one. The results, historically, this organization was charged with replacing the jobs that were lost when Norton Air Force Base closed. That included what's on the base and what's surrounding the base property. And there again, every year we track that metric. If that's not important to you all in this next plan, we won't track it like we used to. We'll do it the way you think it's appropriate for your communities. The next slide, if you would. So we tried to identify also impediments, issues around the environment that we were in 2015. Some of those I think are still relevant. We may have some new ones we could add to the list. And in the next slide, here. So in this plan horizon, the 5 years, in those 4 priority areas where we then took from the adoption of the plan as your staff and tried to propose projects and programs for you to say that you supported or did not, we then broke those down into what do you want to start doing in those areas. So in airport, that 5-year plan looked at financial and operational support. As Ovi pointed out, when we started the plan in 2015, we still were getting money from our redevelopment commitments to directly subsidize the airport operations. We have not because of the litigation. How yet the financial support there, we have been able to do as funds are available. In economic development, the focus was on revitalizing this region and looking at where we can best position that. And in most cases, we've done that through partnerships with developers, with the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, with some of your member JPA jurisdictions, and looked at on an annual basis what is possible and then go forward to implement and achieve. Obviously, we had a good discussion here about infrastructure today. That's still something we're working on, and that is and has been an annual process since we had our first strategic plan in 2010. And then at the bottom, of course, job creation and retention. So for going forward, when we talk about IVDA, if you could go to the next slide, we also need to talk about what's in IVDA. So like many of your jurisdictions, we had in 1990 a base reuse joint powers authority that had special state legislation which created it, but because of the dissolution of redevelopment, there is a separate successor agency. That's not uncommon to you, but that when we say IVDA, we have 2. And that's why you have a budget for one and a budget for the other. So that's kind of where I think I'll leave it and then take your direction from there.
Yes, because you're in the 101.
I understand.
Yes.
I understand.
Okay, all right. Anything else?
Nope,
All
thanks.
right. And let's see here, is this just a,
Madam Chair, just
Yes,
a point of inquiry here. this is an evolving document. You don't need this will not be set in stone until on or about December.
That's right, and my charge is
Okay.
to set those meetings, get these sessions together so you can
Yes.
start breaking this elephant down.
So now is not the time probably to start marking things up in our one-on-ones via email with staff.
Correct.
Start working on it so that we prepare and have that very robust conversation when and if that.
The intent was to provide the building blocks, and then I've
Perfect.
got my direction.
Very good. Thank you.
And with that said, question relative to the 2015-2020 timeline. What is our parameter relative to changing that? What happens if by the end of 2019, this board says, we don't want to go into 2020 with the same plan? What's the process by which this board can consider to modify and amend and also include some kind of a workshop after their orientations that they then can, or we then can provide this different type of input?
So in the current action plan that's proposed on this agenda, we are forecasting additional sessions for a draft to be presented to you before the fall, and then preceding that, then we would have those feedback sessions so that if in December you decide we don't want to do a 5-year plan, or in August you decide we don't want to do a 5-year plan, we want to do something else, we've got clear direction to do that.
Very good. And board members, I asked that question relative to making sure that you all know that we have options.
Yeah.
And that we can change course and that we can shave a year off of this current plan or year and a half, whatever is your will, being that we're already coming to the end of July. But the fact is that we can change course relative to this board's direction.
And to that end, if you don't want to do anything with a strategic plan, this thing has a shelf life. In December, it's done. So.
All right. So being this is a consider and discuss report, any additional comments?
Yeah, I have a few.
Councilmember Popescu.
Going back to the slide number 12, or I guess it'd be 12 on your presentation, 62 on the,
Back it
there,
up.
that one.
No.
Excellent.
Yeah, you
There
were
it
right
is.
on it. Go back to the, it talks, there.
There.
Okay,
There we go.
so I think it's great that we can discuss about what the goals are and plans are, but in the end, I think we need to, while we're here, try to help make decisions that actually takes us to a point where we're actually doing those things rather than talking about what we're going to do and what the goals are. I feel like we've been saying that for years. Until we actually build a road, all we'll do is talking about it. So having said that, I think there's a couple of things that I want to throw out there for the rest of the board to start considering it. There's two areas there, and I think it addresses some of what Mr. Suchel said and what the supervisor talked about, economic development and job creation. And I think that we as a body can do much more than support the airport. There's no doubt about that, and we have done that. I mean, the roads we're building have nothing to do with the airport. They're helping move trucks from Amazon and multiple other entities. So that in itself, it takes care of it. But there's an opportunity to do economic development and job creation. And the reason I had asked earlier about the free trade zone was because I think there's some opportunity for us as a body to try to help everyone, Colton, San Bernardino, the county, Loma Linda, that goes beyond what we do for the airport. And where I'm going with this is we entered in an international trade agreement with the Department of Commerce. There's been a number of meetings we've now had where the Department of Commerce have brought people to us, mostly because of the airport, but they're not all necessarily airport related, about wanting to invest in this area, okay? And this is not done by us. The Department of Commerce is saying, hey, folks, here, folks, I want you to meet with these people, and they might want to help you. And now I'm going to transition to more specifics. It's become very clear, and all of you read in the news, that there's a lot of manufacturing that's moving out of China, and it's moving to Vietnam and all over the world, in essence. But we've had recent meetings with Chinese businessmen that have told us categorically, we're moving out of China, and we're choosing the most stable, powerful country in the world, and that is here. So they are starting to move manufacturing here. Now, we as a body, I think, can play a role in trying to help bring those folks here. Some of them come visit us, but in the end, we have to go out there and find the right partners. With that said in mind, I've recently done a little research and I found out that there is a fair called the Canton Fair that happens in October, and it's in China. And it's basically the largest trade fair in the world where everybody who produces stuff in China displays it to the rest of the world. Everybody who wants to buy stuff from them shows up, and they all make deals. Okay, I'll buy X amount of this. You can manufacture this, what have you. This is an opportunity for us as a body that includes all of the Inland Empire. Go out there, identify businesses that we think could. They're not going to move all their manufacturing here. Nobody's leaving China. They're diversifying. Apple's moving stuff to India and all over the place. So I think there's an opportunity for us. I know the county has sent trade missions to China and all in South Korea and all over. I think we as a body can do more than just focus on the airport and focus on what can we do to bring not just warehouses and distribution centers, but actual manufacturing and other type of businesses that can create jobs that are long lasting that help obviously our communities. So my suggestion is that we should entertain the idea of going to this conference. It's in October, and I think that it's an opportunity for us to thoroughly explore it, and I would like for staff to bring that item back for us discussion with details at the next meeting, which would be in August. And I wanted to kind of pass that on to the board and get their input on that. I figured this is a good time to do it since we're discussing priority and strategy. So I guess if anybody has any opinions, this is the time to express them.
Well, Madam Chair, you know, what Councilman Popescu has suggested is it interfaces with and aligns perfectly with our current focus. And if, in fact, we are tasked with economic development, job creation, I think it's a perfect opportunity to align and hook on. If the Canton Fair opportunity exists, I would support that. But more importantly, as we kind of evolve into the next phase of our strategic plan, I'm very appreciative for the newness and the new blood here on our commission, because it does provide a new horizon for us to explore those opportunities. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity to be part of this strategic plan. It is important. It needs to be refreshed. We'll be working with our team at city government to find out where we can make sure that we align these priorities with our region. Obviously, San Bernardino City is a member agency. We're very grateful for the partnership. We want to continue that. But at the same time, we also have to create value. What is my return on investment for being a member? And so those are questions that I will be, having candid, frank conversations with you and others here is what is the value that my membership and what value does it bring to my city? And so those are offline discussions that we'll have, but I think this is right, appropriate time. Canton Fair, if we could get staff working on that to find out what it is, and I vaguely know about it, but I'd love to learn more about it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I believe that this is part of that projected workshop that we need to put together and bring back. I don't know about the Canton Fair. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. I don't know what that entails. I'd be very interested in perhaps getting some kind of information relative to the president's tariff war, if you will, that is going on with China. The fact that Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Korea, they're all now either being used by China as gateways for their now tariff impacted products. And or the fact that the big international gorilla, China, is no longer at the front door, and that these other countries now perhaps aspire or see an opportunity to begin trading with the United States. So there are different elements of information that we need to have in order for us to garner a clearer perspective. So again, not knowing anything about the Canton Fair, wanting to be inclusive, and what month did you say that is?
It happens, it actually goes over 3 weeks, so you have lots of
What
opportunities to
month?
go.
I
It's
just wanna know.
October 14th to
October.
November 4th.
Okay, so we're in July, August, September, October. I don't know. I just don't know if that would be enough time. I would say very difficult. I want to have a plan in place for this agency before we would do anything like that, and then perhaps have forward planning that would give us the specifics, specific direction relative to whatever comes out from the workshops and is ultimately approved for the next 5-year, 3-year, 1-year plan, whatever that is. But we just need, I like this input, I like this back and forth, very needed, very creative, and brings about all the opportunities that I believe we need. All right, any other comments? Hearing none, being that that's a consider and discuss item only, I'm moving on to item number 9, which is also to consider and discuss the updated action plan for the Inland Valley Development Agency through December 31st of 2019. Thank you. Mr. Burrows.
So the first two on here, July and August, I think we've got July well understood, at least by me. August, look, we talked about it earlier. We are planning to actually finally get in the ground on the Mountain View project, and most importantly, get you the heads up as to what that construction looks like and when the road closures are going to occur. So that I will be emailing you, and we will getting
Thank you.
on the website so everybody has that information.
And are there any changes on this item that you can highlight right now?
So the whole thing is new.
The
So,
whole thing is
yeah,
new.
we do this in
Oh,
6-month bites.
Okay.
So our prior action plan stopped in June 30. Our new draft plan starts in July and ends in December. So what I don't have woven into here, which I will add for your future review, is suggested workshop dates for strategic plan. But my priority will be to get with each of you and get that feedback we talked about.
All right.
So it is subject to update. But it does have a target out there to have a strategic plan update at definitely final. If you want to have an update and a new plan by your December meeting, and we will work back from there based on your feedback.
All right. Questions, board members? None? Yikes.
Record meeting.
Yeah, right.
But you know, what's sad is just me, you, and the mayor talk. Nobody else says anything.
Well, no, hey, they're right. Didn't have a chance to. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. You wouldn't stop.
She asked you if there's any
That's
comments.
good. All right. Moving on, if there are no other comments at this time, I will go into public comment. Is there anyone from the public wishing to come forward and speak on an item that is on or off the agenda but relative to this board? Hearing none or seeing no one, I will close the public comment. Board members, any comments at this time? Hearing none, I will adjourn this meeting to our next regularly scheduled meeting of Wednesday, August 14th. Same bat channel, same bat time, and make your orientation appointments, please. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.